Have you ever had a fear that was so big it felt like it was running your life? Well, we're about to dive into a powerful true story from a writer named William Douglas. It's all about a childhood terror that almost completely took over and the incredible, difficult journey he undertook to finally overcome it.
Now, William Douglas actually knew President Roosevelt, so these words had a really deep, personal meaning for him. This quote, it's basically the key to his entire story. The idea that sometimes the feeling of being afraid is way worse, way more terrifying than the actual thing you're scared of.
So where did a fear this big even come from? Well, it wasn't just one bad day. The roots of this thing were planted over time, through two really distinct moments in his childhood that, together, created this deep, lasting terror of water.
You can really see it build in two stages. First, picture this. He's just a little kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and a huge wave just barrels into him. He's underwater, can't breathe, totally terrified, and his father just laughs. That planted the first seed. Then you fast forward a few years. He's 10 or 11 now, and he decides, okay, I'm gonna beat this thing. He goes to the local YMCA to finally learn how to swim.
So why the YMCA? Well, because the other option was the Yakima River. And his mom was constantly telling him how treacherous it was, filling his head with stories about all the people who had drowned in it. So the pool, it looked like the perfect, safe alternative. But as he was about to find out, that feeling of safety was pretty much just an illusion. And this brings us to the moment, the one incident that would haunt him for years and years. He was just sitting by the pool, all alone, and what he later called his misadventure happened. And that's a bit of an understatement. Out of absolutely nowhere, this big, older kid, a bruiser he calls him, just walks up, grabs him, and chucks him right into the deep end of the pool. The kid was just fooling around, a really cruel prank. But for a 10-year-old who didn't know how to swim, it was a sudden plunge into absolute terror.
9 feet. I mean, to an adult, that might not sound like that deep. But for a little kid who's sinking, who can't swim, watching the surface get further and further away, 9 feet is a suffocating, terrifying abyss.
And this quote just says it all, right? This is what pure fear does to your brain. It completely distorts reality. For him, sinking 9 feet felt like sinking 90. Time slowed down and the panic just got worse with every single inch he went down. Can you even imagine that feeling, the desperation? He's trying to scream for help, he's choking, but only water is coming in. The fear was so intense, it literally stole his voice.
Douglas's own words are just chilling. He says it wasn't just being scared. It was a stark terror. Something primal and paralyzing that you can't reason with, you can't control. It just completely hijacks your mind and your body.
And his body just gave up. It totally shut down. He even had a strategy, to kick off the bottom, but his legs wouldn't listen. They just felt like these heavy, useless weights. He was completely a prisoner inside his own body.
And then something really strange happened. Right there, on the very edge of consciousness, the fight just went out of him. All the terror vanished, and this weirdly peaceful, calm feeling washed over him as everything went black. As he put it, the curtain of life fell. He was essentially dying. Now, obviously he was saved. Someone pulled him out, but that experience left behind this huge psychological scar. The terror didn't stop when he got out of the water. Oh no, in a lot of ways, the real nightmare was just beginning. That fear just took over his entire life. For years, anytime he was even near water, that same paralyzing terror would come flooding back. It totally robbed him of all these simple joys. Fishing trips? Ruined. Canoeing, boating, swimming with friends? Not a chance. The fear just had this iron grip on him. So finally, he decided he'd had enough. He hired an instructor who had this brilliant, methodical approach. He didn't just tell him to swim, he broke it all down. For weeks, all they did was go back and forth across the pool on a rope, then hundreds of times just practicing breathing, then weeks of just kicking. The instructor literally built a swimmer, one tiny piece at a time, making sure none of it was too scary. So after months of all this work, the instructor finally says, okay, you can swim. But Douglas knew. He knew the real work wasn't done. The true test wasn't whether he could swim with someone watching. It was whether he could face that water and that deep-seated fear all by himself. And this is my favorite part. To deal with that lingering doubt, he developed this little mental trick. Whenever he felt those tiny vestiges, those little flickers of panic start to creep back in, he would confront them, head on. He'd actually talk to the fear and challenge it. Well, terror, what do you think you can do to me? What an incredible act of defiance. And this is how he proved to himself that he'd won. He didn't just pass one little test. He kept setting up bigger and bigger challenges. First, swimming one length of the pool alone. Then, he swam 2 miles across a lake. 2 miles! Each time he did something like this, he was stamping out the last embers of that old fear, until there was just nothing left.
And through this whole awful journey, Douglas learned this incredibly profound lesson. See, he had experienced both things, the calm, quiet feeling of almost dying and the raw, stark terror of being afraid of dying. And it taught him that the real enemy was never death itself, it was only the fear of it.
And this quote, it just says it all. Conquering his fear wasn't really about being able to swim. It was about getting his life back. It was about being released from a prison he'd been in for years. He was finally free to live his life and just brush aside fear.
It's such a powerful story about resilience, and it really makes you think, doesn't it? It kind of leaves us with this final question to ask ourselves. What deep-seated fear, if you could finally conquer it, would truly set you free?